We have Kalpak Chavan, and I apologize. I am Canadian and I live in the States, so I really try my best to pronounce people's names right. So I apologize if I did not get that. But we are super glad to have him here today to talk to us. He is a vice president with agility at JP Morgan Chase. And I had to find out that actually there is a big contingent there in India. I thought that it was just an American company. So that's really fantastic. He has extensive work experience of around 13 plus years, primarily in technology across the financial sector. He is a certified Scrum Master, a PSM2, Large Scale Scrum practitioner, and an agility implementation and delivery lead for over 7+ years. So this person really knows the stuff. He has extensive education background. In fact, he has an MBA from the University of Mumbai. And I guess outside of all of that, he still has time to read, and he absolutely loves traveling in his free time, which that's impressive. So without further ado, you have the floor, Kalpak.
Hey, thank you, Angela, for this, you can say, quite a good, cute introduction. Thank you so much. And hello to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you, Angela and Marco and Anuradha. I know Ramya is not here, but all of you who have hosted me and invited me today to connect with this lovely bunch of people out here. So thank you, first of all, to start with. I think my introduction, Angie has given in a very nice way. All I can say is that I'm one of the Agile practitioners, like all of you maybe out here, and somebody who has been trying to ensure that we kind of deliver something to to our customers using various tools and mechanisms. So I'm one of the practitioners, I would say. Uh, Hello to everyone, and I would get started. But I was very happy to see, I was just going through the chat. A lot of you have said yes for Scrum. And that makes our today's session even better because uh, you know what? That's exactly what we are going to talk today. I mean, we are going to talk about less, no doubt. But everything what we are going to talk today is based on our very own, our very favorite uh, framework, that is Scrum framework, right? So I want to, you know, give an opportunity for you all to also ask questions, and I'll be looking up to Angela for whatever questions you have time and again. Feel free to note it down in the chats, and we can take it ahead from there. Now, to start with, I wanted to first show you this picture. This is something which we all know, something which we all are comfortable with, something which we all have read, studied, practiced, and coached people on. That is our very own Scrum framework. Very much the base of what we are going to talk about today. And it all, in fact, started with Scrum, like the the 3 Scrum rules, the 3 Scrum artifacts, and the 5 Scrum events. That's how it started. Now, the analogy was always one team is equal to, one Scrum framework. And that's where all the experiments began with different customers coming together. These are some of the customers I have, you can see in this box. You have JP Morgan, my employer. Then there are some other banks like Merrill Lynch, Bank of America. You have Ericsson. And I'm talking about, a good 7 to 10 years back. There are a lot of case studies out there about this. They all came together to see how we can scale, keeping Scrum as the base of everything. Now, this is where I want to pause a bit and double click on the idea of scaling. why do we need scaling, or what do we mean by scaling, right? Uh, and then there are a lot of narratives around it. There are a lot of perspectives of what and how do we scale. Now, the way I look at something is with our three classic questions: what, why, and how, right? That's how we do Scrum as well. So, scaling is typically when the need with your business or with your product is such that one Scrum team may not able to fulfill. Scaling is required when you know that, hey, your business requirement, your product goals are such that one team of, let's say, 10 members may not be sufficient enough to cater to that backlog. That is where probably the tech leadership or product leadership or all the organizational leadership, they come together and decide that, hey, let's go more than one team. Because our Scrum Guide also says, can we go more than 10 members? Not advisable. Can we go for 15, 20? No, that's not a good idea. So can we break the team into multiple smaller teams and see if we can divide the product requirement into also logical pieces? That is where the whole scaling comes into picture, right? Now, we spoke about what is scaling. We all know now what is scaling. Basically, it's implementing agile frameworks in more than one team. You can have two teams, you can have three teams, and you can have 50 teams as well. So it is like 1 to n. N can be 50 or 100 or whatever, the size of your organization. And why? We spoke about why as well, because probably the business requirements or the product requirements are such that one team may not be able to, sufficiently take care of it in a given time limit. And that is where the how comes into picture. How should we do it? And there are many answers to it. You have many scaling frameworks, and there are many such popular frameworks in the market. You have SAFe framework, Scaled Agile framework. A lot of you may have heard, a lot of you may be experts of it. I'm also a SAFe certified Agilist. So that is one framework which we have for scaling. Then there is another framework which you may also see in official Scrum's taxonomy, and that is called Nexus. Nexus was the framework which was recommended by Scrum founders and the team on how can we scale in more than one team, right? And they recommended Nexus. Now that is where, and that's how this team, as you see, who started doing experiments and came up to something called as a large scale Scrum. Now, large scale Scrum, in a very nutshell, like if somebody asks me what is large scale Scrum, if I have to tell them, my one-liner answer would be Scrum applied to more than one team. You see what is the beauty of this sentence? Scrum applied to more than one team. So 50% of your battle is won there when you have to understand less. It is Scrum. At the very essence, it is Scrum. And hence we say Scrum applied to more than one team. So anybody and everybody out here, if you're curious about large scale Scrum, that is less, if you want to get a practitioner certification or whatever, if you want to implement less in your respective areas, you don't need to know anything like any more, like a rocket science about it. You would be able to get into less within no time. In fact, today in this 1 hour, whatever I'm going to cover is going to cover the major facets of large scale Scrum. But yes, there are days of I myself, I got certified by really good certified folks. I know those the trainers out there who coached me on less. Anyone of you would want to go for certification later on, I'll take care of it at the end. I can refer you to those coaches, wonderful coaches on less. and those are like 1 day, 2 day, 3 day sessions as you deep dive into some things, right? So what I'm going to cover is probably a brief on it, a gist on it. But believe me, even if you go for those advanced certifications, it won't be something like too complicated thing. And that's why I love less. It is your Scrum framework in the sense. And on top of it, you are, building different layers in order to suit your scaling requirements. Now, this one slide, in a way, summarizes a lot of things. If you see that this is divided into 3 rows, the first row talks about your typical Scrum framework for one team. Now, what less says, if you have teams between 2 to 8 number, then you have a typical less framework where you have one product owner, you may have more than one Scrum master, and you may have more than one Scrum team or development team, right? So product owner remains the same, but your Scrum masters may be more than one because your teams may grow. So one Scrum master can take care of maybe 2 teams. So 2 to 8 teams is the number, the n is equal to 2 to 8 in case of less. Now, if your n is greater than 8, then it is called an extension of less. Again, it is less only. It is called less huge. Now, when it comes to less huge, there are some more differences. That is, you have everything that we spoke here. And in addition to that, you have an additional role called as an APO or an area product owner. I'll come to that. Hold on to that. Now, let's come back to this less, which is of 2 to 8 teams. You will see some differences here, and I'll double click on these differences in a couple of slides later. By the way, whatever I'm showing here is not my copyrighted content. It is right there on the official less.works website. This is just like put together in front of you so that I can talk to you guys as a reference, right? And I'll share the website link with you. It's like a Scrum guide for less in a way. So now if you see this second image, you will see that there is some difference here. There are some meetings, or we can call as Scrum events, are combined. When I say combined, meaning you will have like an overall sprint review. What do I mean by overall sprint review? Sprint review will be combined between 2 to 3 teams. Okay. Even a retrospective will be combined between 2 to 3 teams. Okay. And all of them together, they come together to build a potentially shippable product increment. Even on the sprint planning side, that is your left-hand side, as you see, the sprint planning 1 is combined. Planning 2 will be team-based. As you all know, what do we mean by planning 1, right? Your sprint planning 1 is more of like what and why. And sprint planning 2 is individual team talking about how part. How do you achieve this in the sprint? Now, in the sprint planning 1, do you have the entire team attending? If that's the case, then this planning 1 meeting will be like heavily attended if you have 8 teams, right? So not necessary. Maybe you will have 2 to 3 or 2 representatives from each team. They attend the sprint planning 1 and they take back to their respective sprint planning 2 of their teams and discuss the how part of it and get started with your sprint cycle, your recurring or regular sprint cycle. A daily scrum will be individual to your team, no change into that. But as you see, the difference majorly lies in the way some of the scrum events are done in less compared to scrum. And it's logical also, right? Like if you have more than one team, you cannot always have one single review per team because it's a combined backlog, because the product owner is the same, backlog is combined. It is just that you are giving it to different team, which are also called as feature teams, by the way. That's how we kind of propagate, right? We are getting into this whole feature team development mode than a component-based way of working. So that is your less framework. Now, fun begins when you have more than 8 teams. And that is where the whole, we have some additional roles. So as you see here, your left-hand side, you have a product owner. Now the product owner will have divided his backlog, that is the product backlog, into logically divided areas. These areas are called as requirement areas. Let's take an example while I'm talking this, okay? Uh, let's say you have an application like, I'll take a very simple example, may not to complicate. Let's say it's an e-commerce website. Now, e-commerce website in today's time when we talk about is a very big application. It will have complete user authentication and login module. It will have your, features associated with different menus. It will have billing and transactions as different module. It would also have delivery and the, the further backlog, so on and so forth, different features in an e-commerce application. Now, this entire product backlog of e-commerce application, if you have more than 8 teams for that, and you definitely have a product backlog, which can hence be divided into logically tied units. In the language of LeSS, we call it as requirement area. So let's say you have some 5 to 6 requirement area. One area can be, let's say, user authentication. One area can be your carts. One area can be billing and support. One area can be your end user delivery, etc., etc. You see, what are we doing? We are dividing the entire product backlog into logically tied requirement areas, and that's how you create a backlog worth more than 8 Scrum teams. Now, is it even logical to have one product owner for all these more than 8 teams? Let's say we are talking about teams as high as 10 teams. No, it's not possible, right? Humanly, it's not possible. Now, that is where this additional role comes into picture when we are talking about LeSS. This role is called area product owner. Now, this area product owner would be 1:1 ratio with your requirement area. So coming back to the example that we took, e-commerce website, login and user authentication will have one area product owner. This requirement area will have one area product owner. Billing and support will have another one, so on and so forth. All these APOs will report to the product owner. They will work with the product owner to create a combined product strategy. All right. So are we good with the left-hand side? Sprint planning 1 remains the same. Sprint planning 1 will now be divided into different requirement areas. And one requirement area would have, depending on the number of teams which we have, it would have 2 to 3 teams. Let's say we have around 12 teams. So one requirement area can have around 2 to 3 teams, right? So you can divide the 12 teams into, let's say, 4 units or 4 requirement areas. So you have total 12 teams. And you will have 4 APOs, right? One requirement area can have one Scrum Master. So a Scrum Master can handle 2 to 3 teams. I think 3 teams is a stretch goal for any Scrum Master. It is too much of a work. I generally feel a Scrum Master can work adequately in 2 teams, right? If it is a third team, then it is like really a stretch goal for him or her or them. But yeah, that's how that can be navigated around. Some more things are similar to LeSS, like you have combined events, right? We'll double click on this a little later when we talk about this again. But yeah, so this is practically what is Scrum, LeSS, and LeSS. Scrum is you have one product owner, one Scrum Master, one team. The moment you have more than one team, you bring something called a large scale Scrum. Your framework remains the same. The basis remains the same. All our fundamentals of Scrum, that is your sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, sprint retrospective, the way we consolidate and integrate the potentially shippable product increment, all that remains the same. Your definition of dones of the world, ready, your Scrum guide basically remains the same. LeSS is just adding a layer to it, right? So when it is 2 to 8 teams, you have more than one Scrum Master, you have more than one team. Of course, the PO remains the same. And LeSS, you have an additional role called as area product owner to cater to the logically divided requirement areas. Yeah, this is again like one of my favorites representation. As you see in this table, you have Scrum, less huge. In roles, you add APO. Framework is the same. That is the Scrum framework. All three are called frameworks. Less is also a framework. Less huge is also a framework. All three essentially are for product development. They are for complex product development. However, less is generally used in, in technology areas or in technology functions, in complex product tech development. Empiricism remains the same. We spoke about Scrum Master. Yes, one Scrum Master can cater to one to three teams in the world of less. But let me remind you that three again is a stretch goal, but we'll come back, that can be navigated. Product owners remains the same. One product will always have one product owner. The only difference is one product owner can have APOs, area product owners, in case of less huge. Scrum events, as I told you, all the Scrum events that we spoke about remain the same. There is no difference. Just that we add few events like overall retro and. Of course, this is something which I kind of coming back to the slide. If you remember product backlog refinement, that is called PBR. Now, PBR, I'm sure you all recollect our very own Scrum guide. It is not a Scrum event. Do you agree? It is not a Scrum event. In fact, Scrum Guide says PBR can be done as and when required by the product owner and developers to come together. It is like an ongoing activity. You can do 4 times in a sprint, you can do 3 times. If you have a good backlog, you can do just once. So it is like based on what the product owner and the developers feel, they can come together as an ongoing activity and do a PBR. A good sprint planning is a result of a good number of refined product backlog sessions. Now, that is Scrum Guide, or rather that is Scrum Framework. Less says PBR, in less world, PBR becomes a mandatory event. So PBR is something which has to be done when it comes to less framework. And we all know what is a PBR. So there is no surprise element to it. Just the factor is, it is a mandatory element in the case of less framework, less or less huge, right? So that is the only thing that you need to remember. Additional Scrum event. Scrum artifacts remain the same all throughout. Only thing is that when we talk about increment here, in case of less, it is like a potentially shippable increment of all the requirement areas together. So there has to be a lot of consolidated ways of working needs to be there in order to take it ahead, right? So that's about the increment, and I'll talk about it a bit later also. I'll touch base. Number of team remains the same. Yeah. Again, double clicking on the framework, just giving like a wider view. This is what less looks like. The less framework looks like when it is 2 to 8 teams. You have, one common sprint, daily scrums are separate. As I told you, the new thing is sprint backlog will be separate for each of the teams, but the sprint review can be combined. Overall retro can be combined. Yeah. So these are the few things. Now, the moment you say more than 8 teams, you have an additional layer to it. That is, you have area product owners, since you have something called as a requirement area that is tagged to your product backlog. Okay. And every requirement area would have a requirement area backlog. And every requirement area would have one area product owner. So there cannot be a 2 area product owners. If you are doing it, that's an anti-pattern and it would lead to a lot of conflicts. Yeah. I would like to pause here for a minute. And Angela, do you think we can take a couple of questions? Maybe a couple of them, which I can kind of.
I'm
Angela,
so
you're mute.
sorry.
You're
I was
muted.
talking, I was on mute again. Terrible.
Yeah,
Okay, we have some. The first one
sure.
I can find is, can you please elaborate on the key differences between Nexus and Safe? How can we differentiate the areas of its application?
Okay, great. So Nexus and Safe is in the question. Do understand one thing, that Safe is relatively a much larger organizational framework. Scaled Agile framework caters to many more elements of an organizational agility, whereas Nexus, uh, which is again a scale framework, just like LeSS, uh, it is more focused on Scrum-based way of working. If you go to Safe, you will not just notice, a sprint-wise PI-based way of working. Safe is more of an agile transformation from top down. It is much more wider and much more complex in terms of the way it has been construed. I would say it is a more bigger agile transformation framework, whereas Nexus and LeSS are more focused on Scrum. They are more Scrum loyalist, I would say, and I would say even Nexus and LeSS should be top down. Any scaling framework should be top down. When I say top down, that means the whole implementation should come from top leadership. The change should come from top leadership, but they're more focused on the areas of Scrum. That's all I would say. Yeah. Maybe one more question, Angela, before I proceed. What do you think?
Sure. And I think it's very similar. So I guess maybe just if you feel like you've answered the question, then that's okay. The question is the difference between LeSS and Scrum at scale.
Good. So this is where there is really a thin line, and this is where the difference kind of seeks. In fact, I don't think it should be right to say in this forum, but LeSS, Nexus, and Scrum at scale has a lot of synergies. Uh, they have almost similar way in which they are, prepared. Uh, Nexus, Scrum at scale, I'm not very sure in terms of utility right now in industry. I'm pretty sure they must be used, but they are pretty similar to LeSS, if you have to ask me. I'm sure, and there have been evidences where I have read in my research, and of course I have heard through a lot of experts that there were times when they could have been, kind of came together and formed one combined body. But then for whatsoever reason, they have decided to stay separate and, function. But LeSS.works, if you go to their site, they do give official credit to Scrum Framework and Scrum.org, because their basis is Scrum Framework. So there is a good handshake out there. Yeah. So that's all I would say on this.
Great.
So
Thank you.
With this, I'll take it ahead a little bit and probably talk a bit more on requirement area, because this is something which you will see a kind of a more poignant thing that has been added in LeSS, right? And of course, coming back to the example of e-commerce website or anything that we talk about today, right? Any product backlog today is more feature and delivery focused. You take an example of any application that you use on a daily use. For example, and again, coming back to e-commerce because we all love shopping, or let's take an example of binging things like, let's say, Netflix. We all binge on some good content. The moment you log in to go through different menus out there, whether it is your profiles, the password sharing, and then to go through what are you watching, what are the recommendations. There's so much out there. Where is this all data stored? Is it stored on AWS cloud, or what is the background cloud of it? How it should be fetched to you? What is the analytics? It's such a huge backlog, right? And that is where one Scrum team cannot do it. You need a full-fledged, maybe 30, 40 members, teams around it. Can be small teams of 5 to 6 members with logically divided requirement areas. And hence, today, everything is customer-centric. Today, everything is more feature-driven and focuses on customer. Hence, you divide your product backlog into different logically tied requirement areas, as this slide shows. and you have feature teams around it, right? And we all know what we to call about feature team, right? Like one team will be focused on feature and not component. Now this, when I say feature, as in the feature completely takes care about the user authentications utility feature. One completely takes care about the recommendations that are shown to the user on Netflix, etc., etc. Yeah, so hence the role of requirement areas. So area product owner acts like a product owner to that requirement area. So the teams, let's say this team in yellow, for all of them, this area product owner is the PO. They will not go to this PO unless, of course, it's an escalation. But in all given, situation, these teams will reach out to an APO, and they will keep reaching out to the APO that, hey, APO, you are our PO. We look up to you for our requirement backlog, our requirement area backlog. We have to go to our sprint planning too and make our sprint backlogs for our teams. So all these teams, this area product owner will act like a PO. And this area product owner will be connected to the other area product owners, of course, to create and work on the overall product backlog. This person here, the product owner, will be overseeing everything, you know. So generally, this product owner, like the employer in which I work for, they're generally very senior leadership roles of a PO, and APOs are then reporting to PO and all. So it's a big product org. Same thing is with a tech. Yeah, so this is just wanted to touch base on requirement area. These are some of the links. I will be pasting it in the chat. But again, as I told you about, there are definitely sessions where so I'm a less certified practitioner. And if anybody wants, any one of you wants to get certified in less in future, you can reach out to me. I can connect you with my coaches, who are authorized to talk, kind of coach you and get you certified. They are trained, certified less trainers, I would say. I'm not a large scale Scrum trainer. Let me clarify that. I'm a practitioner. I'm an executive, just like any one of you, just like any other Agile practitioner. Like in Scrum world, we have PSTs, right? So I'm not a less trainer, but I know quite a few good less trainers. If you feel you want to get certified, ping me on LinkedIn. I can connect you with them, and you can take it ahead with them, and we can go ahead. But again, the gospel truth, or rather the Bible for large scale Scrum, is www.less.works. It's a very good website. In fact, it is a very dynamic website. You can click on different things, and you can go through everything. It is quite a good consolidation. Uh, you will see a lot of content out there. These things are here. I don't want to get into all of these right now, but I want to just mention some things which I feel were great additions to less. One is lean thinking. Lean thinking, all of you know, and I saw something, some of you mentioning about Kanban. Lean and Kanban actually are one of my favorite ways of working. Less.works or less framework talks a lot about lean. That how we should ensure that we are abiding to the lean way of working, the just in and taking in what we can do and then pushing it out. Also, the systems thinking. What do you mean by systems thinking? Systems thinking is more connected with your different questions on what, why, what are those 5 whys, and getting into a root cause analysis, and having that whole fishbowl way of working. Let's say there is a problem statement. Can I use systems thinking approach and get into the roots of the problem? Right? And systems thinking like is a 1 or 2 hour session if you want to get certified on less, but there are books on that. Then there is something called as queuing theory. Again, one of my favorites. Less talks about all this, right? Queuing theory, again, at a very laymanish way, how you can stack your work items. And that's where the beauty of requirement areas come into picture. How you can stack your work items together, how you can build your queue, and you can ensure that there is an intelligent way of building your backlog, etc., etc. So that's why I like the whole queuing theory concept. But the idea is more with less, doing a lot more with less. Yeah, so these are principles. You can go through it on the less.works. I wouldn't like take a lot of times. Uh, yes, is less is Scrum applied to many teams working on one product, or simply put it as multiple team Scrum. Uh, okay, I would just, yeah, I wanted to cover some of the roles again, like Scrum Master. How does a Scrum Master looks like in the world of less? Uh, Similar to a Scrum framework Scrum Master, but something additional. Uh, he or she or them has to take, right? What are those additional things? Obviously, if he has to cater to 2 to 3 teams, hey, Scrum Master cannot be just like a Scrum Guide Scrum Master. Scrum Master will have to do something more. Or I would say in other ways, some more additional accountabilities or capabilities that would come. For example, technical excellence is expected from a Scrum Master in the world of a large scale Scrum. And when I say technical excellence, meaning it's good to have a technical understanding. Like Scrum Master or in a less world should know what is called as, what is it, testing, what is continuous integration, how can people integrate code, how can they test, what is design thinking at a very high level. He need not be like a master of all and jack of none kind of, but he should have some understanding. He should be also an agility lead, an organizational lead in a way, right? And should have a cross functional understanding. So a scrum master in a world of less should be much more than what a one team scrum framework scrum master does. Yeah. um this is again the technical excellence that what we are talking about. um and it's a full-time role, scrum master, in the world of less framework. It has to be a full-time role. Like, you cannot have a scrum master function uh, as somebody else also, and as a scrum master also, if it has to be a scrum master in less, because there are a lot of accountabilities that would come into picture. And of course, there would be some rules into it, which we just, we're talking about. Now, product owner. Product owner, as I told you, becomes now even more complicated role in the world of less, because he has to be a bit more visionary in his area, his or her area of work. Uh, of course, he has to be profit drivers, more strategic, business risk oriented. But as you know, he has to ensure that his requirement areas are well set, his APOs are, his product cabinet of APOs is very much is touch with him. Uh, Product owner should know the whole user experience and feature design way of working. Product owner should focus on stakeholder management more direction. It's not just the delegation. Of course, he has to delegate, but he should prefer the vision and direction more. He should inspire his APOs to be like a product owner in their respective areas. It's not just, okay, I'm delegating this functionality to this APO, I'm delegating this. No, you have to be me in your requirement area. That is what a PO has to be, right? So they have to inspire their APOs to be just like them in their own requirement areas. So yeah, so a PO has to have more relationships and accountabilities around it. So, and Scrum Master has to work closely in with such a product owner, with the Scrum customers and higher management as well. Yeah, when it comes to teams, the development teams, as I told you in the beginning, of course, we use the word developers now, no more development team in the world of Scrum framework, but it's a team in less framework, and team has to be a self-managing team. It has to be a cross-functional. It has to be, see, co-located. I doubt now, of course, because we work in a geographically diverse products, right? So co-located can be a bit debated, but self-management and long-lived, yes, no doubts about it. But they have to be feature tree. They cannot be non-feature tree. In fact, that's recommended way of working. I know for all given reasons, there are teams which are more component focused even today. wherever I see less implementations. But my recommendation to them is see if you can transition them into feature team. The more you get into feature teams, the more you will have authority of your developers on the kind of requirement area that you're talking about, right? Yeah, so this is about the teams. Again, a kind of a comparison on, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on this, but yeah, we all know what is a feature and component team and why it is probably, and this is a debate also, I know. In some cases, being component team is important. Like, for example, if my system is a very non-feature centric, like it is more of a tech product where my system has APIs, there you cannot talk about feature teams. Of course, I totally understand. There you have one team making an API, one team making a cloud, you can say the database and the cloud migration thing, etc. So I get you out there. In some cases, component teams cannot be avoided. But then you will have to understand your taxonomy. You will have to understand your application ecosystem. You will have to understand your deliveries to your customer, and you will have to decide what kind of a team you have. Yeah. Uh, it's a debate, I know. Less framework or any framework will ensure that will recommend a feature team. But I would say definitely look at what kind of a product you have. Coming to less events, as I told you, we have overall sprint review and overall sprint retrospectives that are added in even sprint planning. One is an overall way. And as I told you at the beginning, PBR is a mandatory event in the world of less. So you have to do a PBR. There is no, it's non-negotiable. Yeah. Some of these links, and these are some of the books also. So again, I would also like to credit my coach, Professor Venkat Krishnamurthy, who actually coached me. He also made ensured that these slides came together, who coached me on less. Uh, these He's a less certified trainer. These Some of the links are actually recommended by him. So these are some of the books also which you see commonly available on Amazon. Some of the good read, like I haven't read all of them, but I have read More with Less. It is a really good book on how you can implement large scale Scrum. Uh, Whenever somebody asks me, the beauty of less is you don't need to, as an organization, you don't need to add a lot of cost to whatever you're doing. You can scale without adding to a lot of cost. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing other frameworks. All I'm saying is that you have to just tweak your product cabinet to just add another role to it that is just of an area product owner, and that's about it. So your scaling cost becomes lesser. Well, I am a certified scaling, a safe agilist also, and I know that a framework like safe would be more cost intensive. So then it depends upon an organization. So if somebody has a question where to use safe and where to use less, I always say look at your organizational taxonomy, look at your organizational structure. Less is relatively lightweight framework than safe. Safe is definitely more complex. Less would be relatively lightweight in the sense it would not add multiple roles to it. It would be Scrum framework only, just that the teams would grow. You wouldn't have to do diagrammatically a lot of changes to your framework. Yeah. You would know more about less on the link, as well as some of these book recommendation. I can share it with you. And yeah, that's about typically about what I wanted to talk about. Just one few minutes before I come back to your questions is on these certifications. As I was telling you at the beginning, these are some of the certifications. So I'm a practitioner. There is less basics also. There is less for executives also. You can see what suits you if you want to get into less. You need not be certified also in any of these and can do less, but it's good to be certified and understand it better, and then implement in your teams. Yeah. So I'll stay on this slide and I would open up for questions. I know we have liberty of 6-7 minutes more. So do we really have any question, Angela, with our participants? Do I need to double click on something before we kind of close the content?
Wow, I think everybody has been really engaged today. So there are quite a few questions.
Sure.
I'll try my best to get through them as quickly as possible. Maybe we'll do like lightning round or something. The
Yeah.
first one is, when having APOs, wouldn't it be the same case as having a proxy PO team community in Scrum? How would this be efficient WRT decision making?
Well, Scrum framework, if you talk about, and I'm talking strictly about Scrum Guide here, the concept of proxy PO is a fictional idea. I know this may hurt, but a lot of companies do have a proxy PO. And I'm sure the Scrum founders itself say that there is nothing called as a proxy PO. As per the book or as per the Scrum Guide, it's just a product owner. That's about it. 1:1 ratio, right? But your understanding is right. So think of it, APO is a necessity for scaling. You cannot do scaling. You think about it. Let's say you are having a team of, let's say, 15, 20 people, or I'll go more than that. I'll say 50 people. Do you think you alone will be able to manage these 50 people? No, you will need your directs. You will need them to manage these 50 people. Again, I'm using the wrong word here. Manage may not be the right word. But I'm just saying to cater to these 20, 50 people. PO does exactly that. PO creates their clones, and the clones are APOs. Proxy PO, I somehow don't like the word, but I know it's a fictional concept, but I know for the fact that there are a lot of proxy POs. So the understanding may be similar, but APO is much more of an accountability, much more of a necessity of a requirement area and less. That's all I would answer this as. We can take
Perfect.
the next question. Yeah.
Next one is sprint planning one is mandatory to be held together.
Well, I know some teams don't do it, but you know what? In a requirement area, if you don't hold it mandate like together, like an overall sprint planning one, you may miss out on lot of updates uh, on the reason why you have one backlog for that requirement area. Think of it: you have an APO, and there are 3 teams. Let's say you don't do sprint planning one mandatory. Okay, how else will you logically divide your backlog in terms of 3 teams sprint backlog? Yes, you may say that, hey, you can have a product backlog refinement, which can be an overall product backlog refinement. Point taken. But planning one for a reason. It is like we all pledge together that these are the things that we'll commit to. This is what is, and this is why it is. And these are our sprint goals. And so planning one is more on pledging something, so all the teams may just choose things for their sprint backlogs. And hence it needs to be a overall sprint planning one. If you don't combine it, there is a possibility that you may run into anti-patterns. I have seen it myself, and I'm resolving it in my teams. It is very natural to have it. And then you will have issues of collaboration. Collaboration in terms of this, if you are still seeing the screen of your potentially shippable product implement. Even issues of dependency management, which is very common in any of the requirement areas, scale teams. Yeah. So that's how it is probably required.
Next question is, what happens if one of the 3 teams is not ready with the increment to present in combined sprint review and the other 2 teams are ready? So what happens if one team is not and the others are ready to go?
Fantastic question. So this is where, and that is where I mentioned about Scrum Master comes up with some additional feathers on the cap. Yes, this is very much a reality. This happens. And that is why it is important that Scrum Master should also know about technical integration of the teams. So if there is such situation, probably the dependency management has to be foreseen and handled on a day-on-day basis before the sprint end. Let's say you are a 10-day sprint, review is on the 10th day, and Scrum Master, who is a common Scrum Master of probably all the 2 to 3 teams, he should flag this off on 6th day, 7th day. Obviously, a team which says on the 10th day that, hey, we are not able to go on the last day, it will definitely have some churn or some spillover in your potential increment, no doubt about it. But if the Scrum Master flags it on a seventh day, with his technical expertise and collaborative overview with the other two teams, she, them would be beneficial, in fact, to plan it out better so that we ensure that the other two teams who are relatively ready go with a shipping increment, and this team probably can logically tie it in the next one. So this is where the understanding of the Scrum Master and the developers comes into picture on, and that's why I said Scrum Master should have a little bit more additional feathers when it comes to less framework. In the world of safe, if you remember, you have release train engines, and RT Scrum Master engineers are very important. They definitely should have a little bit of technical knowledge as well.
Great. I unfortunately have a hard stop, so I'm hoping that Marco can kind of fill in for me, but it was a wonderful session and I really appreciate all this conversation. And I didn't know anything about it, so I'm glad I was here to listen to this, and I will reach out to you.
I can take a couple of more questions. I mean, if there are any, or else we can close it.
So thank you, Angela, and don't worry, I've got this. Where were we on which question? That's the first thing I probably have to ask. Did you actually answer about what happens if one of the teams is dependent on the outcome provided by other two teams?
Not exactly this question, but I can take this one also. Okay. And that is where the whole dependency management comes into picture, of how, like in Jira's, you have the concept of creating DSTs. A Scrum Master probably can flag a lot of DSTs. And that's where, coming back to the Scrum Masters, the way Scrum Master would probably will have to ensure that the dependencies are very well matched in the respective backlogs in the upcoming sprints would be very important. Hence, this whole collaboration and dependencies can, or would rather, is expected from the, so if you see the Scrum Masters, accountabilities grow more. So any one of you who is a Scrum Master here, or even aspiring to be, or is rather a practitioner and wants to get into less, you would have a gala time, I'm sure.
Okay, there was a second question to that from the same person about what's the event in LeSS where interdependencies will be discussed to avoid failure of one of the teams? And this joins up with another question, which, if I find it right, what happens if one of the teams is less? No, I can't find the other question, but I'll find that shortly.
No problem. To answer your question, so in less.works, as I told you, PBR is mandatory. Now, overall PBR is also added in LeSS framework. So when we say overall PBR, as in that requirement area can have a combined PBR also. So maybe if you have a 10-day sprint, you can have a combined PBR of, let's say, 1 hour. And then each of the team can have respective PBR. So these can be two variations to it. So this way, a lot of dependency management, cross-team collaboration can be discussed and well handled, right? And Scrum Master can play an active role here to manage this, of course, and representative of every team can be a part of this overall PBR. The Scrum Master can facilitate this and take this dependency management ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just a quick question. Will we get the slide deck?
I can. I mean, I can share this material. I can share the links. As I said, this is less.works together. Content. Everything is out there also, but this is put together thanks to some of the coaches that I have been worked with. I would love to, call them out as well on this forum. I mean, annotate them as well. And, you can also reach out to them if you want to know further deep dive, and you can reach out to me as well, and we can talk about scenarios. So definitely I can share this.
Great. I've actually saved the chat. And there's a whole load of questions. You actually inspired everybody to actually bring up something like 15 to 20 questions. So there's a lot to get through and we're run out of time.
Yeah.
Is that okay that if I actually share
Sure.
those questions to you, maybe you can actually just do a post. People can follow you and then you can do a post and just actually share some
Absolutely.
responses and let people actually digest that. Would that be
Yeah,
good
and
for you?
that would be amazing. I can tag all of you also, so we can have, like a collaborative writing on this, and I can share my thoughts, and we can have more SMEs talk about it. So feel free to share those questions. We can
Yeah,
take it.
obviously, if you want to connect with Kalpak, and then share your questions straight away with him. You can copy it now before we close your questions, okay? Or if you need the question, then let me know. You can reach out to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can reach out to you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Kalpak. That was an amazing session. And thank you, Ramya, for actually bringing Kalpak to us. Really appreciate that. And
Hi, Ramya.
and as our community, you are the ones that matter the most to us. Sorry, Ramya, you wanted to say?
No, I said I apologize that I couldn't join early, but I just managed to join this. But I'm happy to see that Kalpak and he is the king in less. No one can beat him in less. So of course, I mean I'm proud that the session went well. So I'm happy to help SMOT.
Yeah, there was actually a question that might spawn you actually, Kalpak, some ideas, and I'm trying to think what it was. It was about actually, could you actually share an experience about actually using less with multiple products in one less group? And I don't know if that's something you can answer right now, but maybe you could actually think about maybe there's something you can actually bring up as another talk and come back and
Yeah, sure.
give us a delta on that.
I'll definitely, we can do that later someday. And what I would also like to see, like I has been quoting less.works again and again, there is a page on case studies out there where even my employer and many other employers, brands, Amazon, Ericsson, Bank of America of the world, all of them have talked about their practical case study implementation of less. So what I would highly recommend is, please go through it. Probably those are some practical use cases that you can refer. And I'm sure you would get more and you'd be able to connect dots to what I spoke about. I would be more than willing to come again, and talk to all of you. Sure, anytime.
Oh, that would be awesome, Kalpak. And thank you again for actually giving us your time and coming to the Scrum Master of the Universe's community, to our meetup. And I'd just like to remind that, without our community, we wouldn't be much of a thing. So thank you everybody for turning up today. We hit a nice number of people, over 50, and it was really great. Thank you for engaging with us, and take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Scrum on and less on.
More with less.
More with less.
More
Bye-bye.
with less.
Take care.
Thank you. See you. Take care.
Thank you.